depends on your environment. So if environment is such that actually once you fail, it's easy to, sort of you're not stigmatized, and then it's easy to start something new, then that's okay. But if like everybody's like, oh, he or she failed, then it's not very encouraging, right, for you to start and do other things. So I think maybe it used to be like, that people were more kind of ashamed of failing at something. I hope that's changing.
Hello and welcome to the Recursive podcast. Our next guest is one of the first female investors in the region. Tatjana Zabasù Mikuž is the managing partner at South Central Ventures, an early-stage VC fund which is investing here in the Balkans. Last year they closed their third fund at 70 million euro. Tatjana is also the co-founder of the first venture capital fund in Slovenia back in 2008. Since then, she's been actively involved in more than 40 investments. She has also served as a board member of companies like Cognism, InPlayer, Efos, and Shout. Tatjana, welcome to the Recursive podcast.
Well, it's very nice to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
It's a great pleasure to have this conversation with you. Preparing myself for what is about to happen in the next approximately 1 hour, I was very, very curious about how it all started from something like a government institution that led you into entrepreneurship. So would you just briefly tell us what happened to change your career path so drastically from governmental policies, economy to entrepreneurship?
Well, actually, I got familiar with entrepreneurship quite early on. Actually, my dad had his own business. So I got the flavor of it. And then actually the episode with the Minister of Economy was more or less a chance. At the time I joined there, I used to work actually at the research center of the Faculty of Economics, and then one of the professors stepped in, became the minister, and she invited me to join the team there. So when I joined, I was quite surprised about how things work there. At the time, actually, I was pretty lucky, I would say, because minister at the time started working a lot on competitiveness policy and different measures that can be accepted on the government level to help companies be more innovative and more entrepreneurial and more competitive on a global scale. So that was kind of an interesting experience for me, and it sort of, I got familiar also with, briefly at the time, with various forms of financing this kind of, let's say, tech companies, like angel investors and VC funding, but that was just like, knowing of it, but not really doing it. So I don't know, afterwards I didn't see myself staying in administration for longer period of time. So it's sort of, I was looking for different opportunities to sort of, continue my career in other areas.
I spotted a word there, interesting. Mm-hmm. So was it your curiosity that got you excited about all of this? It is to a great extent. Like I usually tend to, I want to understand how things work and why things are happening and things like that. So it's kind of, it made me curious a little bit. Yeah, there's something that I didn't know about your upbringing, your entrepreneurial father. What was your education back then, and why did you choose it? Just to have a bit of a context.
Oh, well, my education is very boring, I would say. I wasn't sure, I was, pretty good in everything I was studying. So when we had the, advisory on which school to go to, they just told me, whatever you choose, it seems like you can do anything. So I was like, okay, fine. And then I was thinking on what I should do. And I didn't really come up with a very smart idea. So I started economics, I went to business school, which, I guess it's I wouldn't say I was really inspired or I really wanted something. It was just by chance, more or less.
Yeah, the same story with my life, of course, but you later on used to a very good extent your education, having this entrepreneurial route that you were taking. So I've read that a lot of especially in Macedonia, North Macedonia, a lot of IT people involved in the whole startup ecosystem are ladies. So you're saying that you didn't have this clear picture, but obviously they do, because they are digging into this niche, and it's important for you to be promoting female entrepreneurship and females in IT business in general.
Yeah, that's one of the observations I actually have, because of there's in the past few years, or maybe even a bit longer, there was a lot of talk about female entrepreneurs and getting more women involved in tech and all that. And what I was noticing is actually that maybe even in Western Europe, there are even less women involved in that, and that I was kind of surprised, really, even when I started going to Macedonia more, that actually it's quite a vivid community of ladies, girls in tech, women in tech, female entrepreneurs. So it's but I think maybe it's in a way related to our past, in even in communism, socialism, within Yugoslavia. I think women were sort of expected to be active, to participate in, also in the, maybe not on the top positions, but still involved in business to a certain extent. So, and they were definitely less likely to stay at home as, non-working moms. So I think maybe that's part of the reason for that. But otherwise, I think, you're right. Actually, in Macedonia, I think it's quite surprising I'm not sure about the statistics, but I definitely see a lot of women involved in tech as well.
That's great. Before participating in the creation of the first VC fund in Slovenia, you have worked in consultancy and corporate finance. Tell us a bit about this type of the journey, this part of the journey that you took.
Yeah, as I said before, I didn't want to stay in administration for a longer period of time, so I was looking for something else to do, and it sounded quite interesting to do, corporate finance things in an international or multinational company. So I joined Deloitte at the time, and I did a lot of work on the transaction supports. We did a lot of due diligence stuff, preparing a lot of memos, and did some valuations, and all of these are things that actually help you a lot with evaluating the companies. You learn more to, let's say, which things to look for, especially on the financial end, because I was in corporate finance, obviously, but also question the assumptions and, try to figure out why things and who's the market, and who are your buyers and who are your suppliers and how dependent you are on things. So, this was a part that actually made it interesting, and plus, also the financial planning, modeling and things like that. So it's quite a few useful things that actually helped me also then, sort of approach these tech companies. And of course, you cannot use the typical, or usually you don't use the typical or classical valuation methods to do that with startups, but you don't have the data sets. So it's, but it sort of, you learn how to approach things. So, and it was an interesting experience. Obviously, I had to work a lot with my teammates, so it's always every project was a team effort. So I had a lot of people that had a lot of, being a part of this multinational company actually means that you have access to a lot of knowledge and experience from other people and other countries, actually. And it's an interesting experience. But in a way, it's not what I sort of really was looking for, because it seemed in a way that it was you're too remote from your work, really, because you always do one part of it, and then in the end what comes out is sort of, it's kind of yours, but then there are other people that take over. And so it's maybe it's a big organization, and then it's always I don't know, I kind of felt that I want to see more direct results of my work.
So bigger impact on personal level.
Yeah.
Awesome. And if you need to pinpoint a specific skill that was very helpful now as an investor that you acquired back then, what would it be?
Yeah, I think exactly. Like, first of all, it's like very technical thing. So, like in terms of financial analysis and stuff, but also like, you know, when you're sort of, I don't know, evaluating or doing the due diligence of a certain company, then you need to like sort of learn to ask the right questions and like really not just take things for granted. Like if somebody tells you something that's not necessarily true, right? So you have to sort of question all the assumptions and sort of try to figure out whether it's true or not true. And also like through these kind of processes, you also learn from others also on like which areas are maybe most likely to, you know, be problematic, like where you should dig a bit deeper and try to find out what's behind it, and yeah. But,
having all this background knowledge, you started the first VC fund in Slovenia in 2008, right after the global financial collapse. Mm-hmm. And you were the first VC fund at Slovenia at that time, so first in the entire country. What was it like back then, and what was your main takeaway from the experience?
There was a lot of first times in that fund. So we were the first fund in Slovenia. We had a new law that was introduced just in end of 2007. So there was some kind of like a status of VC fund defined there. So that sort of gave us an opportunity to really try to raise funds for this kind of fund, because that's the biggest problem that you have as a first-time manager. First of all, you don't really have too many people to learn from in that environment. But second of all, it's really difficult to get the funds. We were quite lucky in timing, I would say. We started in 2007 raising the funds. And that was a time where most of the companies actually had excess cash on their balance sheets. And a lot of them were actually making great returns on stock market. So that was in a way also like maybe a bit of an obstacle, because they were expecting, we would say, that they would be, you know, we would be promising some crazy return rates, like, you know, I make 50% a month, right? So this was not something we would want to promise, you know, to our investors. But nevertheless, I mean, there was enough, I would say, surplus capital that they sort of dared to put in a risky type of investment like venture fund. So we had a lot of everybody actually was first-time investor in the VC fund. So there was a lot of, you know, expectation management, which we were partially successful in, but not entirely, because also like investing in a VC fund, it's a long-term investment, and it was quite obvious, especially immediately, like towards the end of 2008, and even more so in 2009, that as soon as we were calling the capital, you know, it was much more, now we need to pay in this money, not just commit it. So, so it was an interesting experience, definitely. There were quite a few things we would have done differently now if we were doing it, but and we have actually. But it was an interesting. Also, the cornerstone investor at that time was actually our Chamber of Commerce, that actually dedicated part of the funds that they got from sale of some real estate, I think, to the fund, and they also sort of actually, especially a lady that was vice chair at the Chamber of Commerce. She was sort of. She gave the initiative for this fund, actually, so she also helped a lot with her connection. So we sort of managed to convince enough managements of enough companies to contribute to the fund. So we started small, and then later on we had, but that was even two years later, our government actually introduced like a matching scheme. So they matched the funds that we were able to raise from private investors. So that gave us a bit more dry powder to invest.
It seems that my takeaway from your story is that women are not risk averse, and this lady was leading with courage to invest in something that was very unknown at that time in Slovenia.
Yeah, it was even, I think even she wasn't quite sure on what she would want to do. She was sure that she wanted to convince people at the management of the Chamber of Commerce to actually dedicate these funds to to sort of let's say encourage entrepreneurs to get external funding. So yeah.
Awesome. What's the impact that you would like to achieve through your current investments with the South Central Ventures?
Yeah, so we are focusing on the Balkans, as I said, so we are looking for the companies here, but of course we want companies or entrepreneurs that have this global vision, so they want to be players in global market, not in their own country or the region. And that of course takes quite some, it takes courage, it takes vision, and it takes quite some funding as well to be able to make it in the global market in most cases. So this is our role is actually to help them get through this initial stages. Like we don't do pre-seed really. So we are looking for companies that already have some traction, but we want to help them bridge this gap to get to larger markets. Like typically it's US more often than Asia. But what we see is also that attracting funding from, let's say, your target markets, it gets easier in later stages. But like this early stage is quite challenging. And also, let's say, there are a lot more and more actually, even US investors looking into the companies here. But I think they sort of feel more comfortable if they have like a local investor sharing the risk, let's say, or taking the initial risk. So this is our role, really, to help them grow to a certain stage where they are more likely to raise from, let's say, larger funds. And that's also our sort of strategy, that we cover seed stage and Series A somewhere and then sort of support them and then introduce them through networks too.
I introduced here the SCV, the South Central Ventures, just after talking about the fund in Slovenia. How did SCV came to life?
We actually, it's the core team that started the first fund in Slovenia. So Jure and myself started it, then Jan joined us, and we are also the core team, let's say, in South Central Ventures, joined by Goran last year. And we actually, after we had that first fund for some time, we wanted to sort of raise another fund, and we were looking at the region, not just Slovenia, because Slovenia is a very small country, so having a fund in Slovenia is pretty limiting, I would say. Somebody once said that, Montreal, and probably Montreal is now bigger than 2 million population, but somebody said yeah, this is like Montreal, and nobody ever says I'm investing in Montreal, So it's like, this is the story. So we wanted to do a bigger market, so we started kind of fundraising, which was quite challenging because we were raising a size of a fund that was maybe too big to raise from these first-time investors. Plus, the situation maybe was not all that favorable as in 2007. And on the other hand, because the fund was not big enough, you're not interesting for funds of funds because they don't want to have more than 10% and blah blah blah. So it's tricky. But then at the time we there was also an initiative that came from the countries. I think even Serbia at that point initiated that, so that the countries from the region wanted to do something in sort of supporting the development of VC investing in the region. So there was also a call for expression of interest in that was managed by EIF actually and European Commission at the time. It was, I think, kind of pre-accession assistance also. So they actually were, there was an investment coming from the Commission and some of the countries also in the region. So that covered one part, and we applied for that and we were selected as a team, and then that was the initial portion of the capital that was invested, and then we of course raised from private investors as well. So we sort of established offices also in Zagreb, Belgrade and Skopje at the time, so that's how we sort of formed the team.
How has the ecosystem changed and evolved since you started investing here on the Balkans?
It's quite lively, I would say. So when we started, the SCV actually started in 2015. And at the time, I would say Serbia was just starting to, a lot of initiatives popping up, and I think that's developed quite substantially over the past few years. Croatia, I think, made a great step forward also because they also had a lot of these great stories with bigger investments raised, like from starting with Belabit a few years ago, and Rimac, Infobip, everybody. So it's like there's a lot of, I would say, even hype, but definitely it's there are a lot of stories that actually support people in or attract entrepreneurs and encourage them to start their own businesses. So I think there's a lot of very positive development. And also I would say Macedonia, for example, even in 2015 they started, and there's like a lot of associations, organizations, plus there's a lot of support also coming from some of the organizations like World Bank and some others that are also, and even some governments like European countries also supporting some entrepreneurship programs and stuff like that. Also trying to bring as many experienced people from abroad to sort of help these entrepreneurs bridge the initial problems, let's say. Not just in terms of funding, but also in terms of, consultants, like advisory in various areas.
So I would say lively, very...
It's very dynamic, I would say. Yeah, it is. It is very dynamic, and we see more and more companies popping up. I think it also comes in waves a little bit, and it was very in, so to speak, to have a startup, and being an entrepreneur. It's like sort of a hype.
We've seen it in Bulgaria after the acquisition of Telerik by Progress Software back in 2014, that it started a wave, that tsunami is going, and now we have the first unicorn, the Payhawk. And is there a way that the first successful investments of SCV, like Cognism at the moment, are already giving back to the ecosystem in a way?
Yes, definitely. I think the very important thing is to give an example, and you see, they become role models like these founders. And as you mentioned, in the case of Telerik, I think they also gave back, like in terms of financing and sort of supporting or helping the entrepreneurs. And I think this is happening with everywhere, like across the board, and also with definitely with our companies as well, where you see, at least people have somebody to talk to. They see that it's possible to do like a successful company from some small environment that's maybe not it's not Silicon Valley, or it's, and then you have people that actually already did something and have tried something and have some experience, and they share that. It's kind of a community that's building up, and they also talk to each other. They have networks. They know somebody somewhere who can help with this or that, or they already made a mistake, so they tell somebody, don't make the same mistake. That's one thing. And the other thing is that also people who work in this kind of startups that grow, and then there's, I think, a lot of this, I want to build something on my own, and then you have this, let's say, people who leave this kind of successful startups and start something on their own because they get an idea of what they could do, and are encouraged by the success of their previous company, let's say. So I think it's a very, very positive, and I think this is something that's just starting, and it will have even more impact going forward.
Looking directly at this process of evolving of the whole ecosystem, what do you think the region still needs or lacks to have systemic success? So it's like regular success.
It's it's kind of hard to define that, but I think it takes some time. It takes experience. It takes somebody who's done it before, and it takes networks. And I think that's the biggest, let's say, difference if you're starting a business here or compared to if you're starting it is in Silicon Valley or someplace else that's very sort of known for, or even Estonia, for example, I think, or Israel. that's even better example, I would say. You know people, you go for lunch with people, you know, that might be at some point either your client or in the end, your maybe acquirer or something. So it's more of these relationships, there's more of, I would say, communication directly with this kind of people. And I think this is something that just cannot happen overnight, right? So it takes some time.
Yeah, and deliberate effort towards looking for connections and people that have been in the places that you want to go to.
Yeah, definitely this, and not underestimating the power of building these relationships and maintaining them. It's not always that. I mean, you cannot just expect that you would have like a direct benefit from knowing somebody, but it's sort of relationship you build, some trust, whatever, like reputation you build. So
sounds like this African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to raise a unicorn or even a successful company.
Yeah,
awesome.
Definitely.
What do you think is the biggest challenge for Balkan startups to scale to larger markets like the US?
Well, I think part of it is this networks, right? Mm-hmm. It's always easier if you're present there, you know who to turn to, I don't know, the culture better. Like, it depends on what type of business you're in anyway. But I would say, it's also, and I think that may be less and less, but it's also about, how convinced you are that you can do something and the vision that you have. Maybe sometimes we think too small here because it's a smaller environment. But I think if you're born in US and raised in US, I guess you think big from the start, right? And here it wasn't always the case. So I think maybe it's, but also like the market, if you're in a big market, then even the testing field that you have is much bigger than in markets like here. When sometimes for certain products or technologies, you don't even have the test market in your home, like your closer environment, let's say. So I think this is probably, plus of course the financing and also like in terms of getting more funding and more people, for example, investing in, let's say, in venture funds and then venture funds in companies. It also sort of, for them, it's important, and also for venture fund, it's also important that you see an exit path. And when you have a large enough number of potential acquirers for a company, it's you're sort of de-risking to a certain extent. But so definitely, it's a whole environment, right? It's like that you need to have enough. Big enough talent pool, you need to have enough knowledge, you need to have the market, you need to have, in the end, you need to have the acquirers and the funding and everything else. So it sort of builds up, and if you don't have that in your local environment, you need to find it abroad, and then you need networks and you need connections to actually be able to get. So it's a whole package, I would say.
I picked up a word, confidence.
Yeah.
That comparing Balkan founders compared to US-born or Western Europe-born people, we are lacking a bit, or not dreaming bold enough and big enough. I guess maybe it's not it's in a way the way you're raised, but you also are sort of growing up probably in an environment that's where the numbers are bigger from the beginning, right? Because the market's bigger, so the investments are bigger then also, but also there's more potential, right? So I guess that's one of the things. And the other was probably because I think here in the region, we are very focused on product and technology. And then people just want to make things really work perfectly before they start selling them or promoting them. And then sometimes they figure that maybe they over-engineered a little bit, and maybe what they developed was not exactly what the market needed, and then you need to pivot and all these things. But I think generally, of course, it's, you always have like the whole spectrum. But in US, I think generally there were more companies that actually said, okay, it's good enough product, let's go sell it.
So then you start earlier, then you also have the chance to sort of go back and maybe change something earlier and then adjust and fine-tune and all that. So that's, I guess, a bit of a difference in approach to things. So.
How do you manage to support the companies in your portfolio to overcome all the weaknesses, let's say, like the points that they can improve on?
Well, we try to sort of connect always the founders with, the people that we think are experts in certain areas, depending on what they lack. But so you always try to sort of help with filling the gaps in terms of talent or experience. And then the other part that we do, and we think is really important, and especially now when we really have quite a few companies already in portfolios, so they can actually we're trying to sort of make a bit of a community in that, to also help encourage founders to help each other, to exchange knowledge, these kind of things. And then, of course, trying to support them with fundraising, like, these are the areas you need to think about. How will you present that? How did you think you should do that? So maybe just trying to sort of ask the difficult questions before they actually go out and pitch. But also when they're defining their further development strategy, I'm just like, maybe you should think about that, or be careful, don't do the same mistake that somebody else did, or something like that. So sort of trying to share the experience, share the knowledge, and also share the networks that we also have. Also try to attract other investors, and it's always easier if somebody introduces you to somebody else. It helps.
Yeah. Sounds like being a business psychotherapist. Like, have you thought of this? Is there someone that can help you with it? Asking questions. Actually, we sometimes feel like we are more of a psychotherapist than maybe business, finance people. It definitely is a big part of that as well. It's normal, isn't it? We are human, and we would like to feel accepted for our crazy ideas and supported. So it motivates us to do better and to do more.
Definitely, but that's one aspect. And the other aspect of this psychology is also like the whole consumer's response to whatever you're offering. And then, so that's a huge part of development, yeah. Okay,
do you have a favorite question that you ask founders when they're coming for your support and, of course, capital?
Not really. I wouldn't say I have a special question that I ask everybody. I just I really enjoy talking to founders that are really enthusiastic about what they do, and they are really dedicated. When you see that they know the market inside and out, and it's like that's in the technology on the other side, or the way they are actually addressing this market. I think that's really, it's really fulfilling and exciting for me. That's something I really enjoy. But then, the questions you ask, it depends a lot on the conversation. It's like, doing a podcast. So, I definitely always ask questions about, the market. What are you actually doing? Like, why do you think anybody would buy this? And like, who would be the person that would buy this kind of product, and things like that. But then definitely sort of course, why are we different, and all these kind of things.
As an active listener, I heard a word that you didn't use, and it's preparation.
Yeah.
So you're poking in ways to see how well prepared people are.
Yeah, it's always like that was a rule, like you have to, like when you were sort of presenting on how entrepreneurs should be prepared for pitch or stuff. It's always like, know your numbers. It's not just numbers. Like you have to. It's much more about the market, the opportunity, and other people that are trying to solve the same problem you're addressing. So that definitely preparation is there's nothing without preparation.
Nothing, absolutely. Ben Franklin has this saying, if you're failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail.
Exactly. So
how do you measure the potential of an early stage startup?
Well, that's kind of sometimes it's a mixture of let's say the numbers and the art. So the hard data part is about, how big this market is, like how big it can grow, how fast is it growing now, like what's the competition, like how many players are in the market, how likely it is to, for this company to be able to succeed. But then there's sometimes all of these things are perfectly okay, and you still don't feel like this team and this company can actually make it. Because it's, preparation is key, but also execution is also key. So even if you're very well prepared, but if you cannot execute, it's not going to happen, right? And this is the art part, right? When you're trying to figure out whether this team or company has a potential to actually do something in whatever they're trying to do. So yeah, it's as I said, I mean, one part is, of course, if you have like a market that's in decline, of course, you don't expect a company to be able to grow significantly in this kind of market. But then it's, also like sort of having a crystal ball and trying to predict the future a little bit. But yeah, it is very, like, and it sounds like a cliche, it's all about the founders. But in fact, it is. I mean, it's people who make this business succeed or not.
So you already pointed towards the founders. Let's say if preparation is important while pitching and preparing to get some cash, execution is important after you get the cash. So are there some particular things that you look for in the founders that you choose to work with? Apart from what you just said, to be passionate about what they're doing.
Passionate about what they're doing, knowing what, the market, craft. The thing, what they do, of course, the domain knowledge. And in terms of their characteristics, I would say you look for people who are adaptable, but quite stubborn, nevertheless, because if they have their idea and their vision, there would be a lot of things that will, be sort of deterring them from doing what they want, or like obstacles on the way. So you have to be a bit stubborn. If you're not, then I don't think you're tough enough to make it. But then on the other hand, you also want people that are open to listen to other people, more experienced, coachable for sure. We are sort of, because you can bring people with a lot of experience and a lot of good advice, but if somebody's not listening, then it's not helping. So definitely, coachable. And you are, in a way, looking for somebody that you can actually work with, because as a VC manager, you're not like, it's not like investing in stocks where you just put your money there and then you wait and whatever happens, happens. But here it's like you're trying to sort of not to do the operational stuff and do the daily operations, but do try to help, on a more strategic level, but also like when it's necessary, also with more operational things. But sort of you work quite closely with the companies you invest in, so you sort of need to get along with them to at least to a certain extent, right? So it is a bit of let's say all these soft elements. There are a lot of soft elements in the play. Because maybe sometimes even people who can do great things, but you just don't feel the connection. And if you really cannot see yourself working with this kind of person, then it's really difficult. And I don't think I would, I personally wouldn't go with an investment if I thought that I really cannot work with this person. So
it's good to know from founder's perspective that being outgoing and friendly is a very important trait, because
I mean,
you need teammates.
Exactly. I mean sometimes, and it's not like, people are different. We all have different preferences, different things we look for. So I think it's just need the right investor for what you do. I mean, it's, you hear that a lot, that, getting an investment is like, getting married. So you better watch out on what kind of partner you choose. So. And this is why also the entrepreneurs, so founders, are encouraged to do some due diligence on potential investors, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Having my personal experience and, of course, the teams, that there is absolutely a strong engineering talent in the region, but we're still missing in sales, product, and marketing expertise. How do you think we can improve these gaps in these categories?
Yeah, I think this is a kind of, it takes a bit of a change in mindset, I would say, but also, this was the tradition, right? Like the technology was always a thing here in the region, I think. And so a lot of focus was on it. And, even now, like you get a lot of people who would say, oh, this is such a great product, it will sell itself. No, it won't, right? Don't underestimate the power of selling and marketing and all that. So I think, it's, like when you have certain knowledge here, it's passed from generation to generation. Like this marketing, sales, business orientation, it was less pronounced here. So these are the things that I guess people will learn with the time. And then you also guess like a lot of our companies have very mixed teams. So they have a lot of, let's say, marketing or sales stuff closer to the target markets, which again is kind of natural. Because if you're targeting, a US market, then you better get some salespeople that are in US and from US because they know the environment there much better. So I suppose that one is they have networks, the other is they know the way people think or the way people react better than you do if you're or selling to Asia, for example, which is, I guess, even more challenging. But you always need that. So I think to a certain extent, like the sales skills are maybe even, will never be as developed here. Like maybe that's a bit pessimistic view of that, but maybe they will never be as developed here as they are, for example, in US, because just the markets here are smaller and there's no need actually to be, or you're not even selling here, right? So developing this sales force here, maybe, but definitely I think every founder is selling his idea, even if not, you're selling your idea to a fund manager, for example, when you're looking for an investment. So you need to have that too, right? And just understanding that marketing part, which is, understanding the needs of the market and then adapting the product to it, it's very critical. And I think that's sort of like when you can learn from people that have done it before, then it sort of starts, increasing, improving. I think it will maybe take a little bit of time, but it's even that. I think it's changing also, and a lot of people, when people go abroad, come back, start businesses here. They have experience from different environments, so I think that's sort of mixing the cultures, mixing the environments. That helps a lot.
Every founder that I've met can sell his idea in like a very easy fashion, but transferring this passion and understanding to your salespeople is sometimes hard.
Yes, it's also, and what they say, it's like a statistic, like if you hire, like when you're hiring salespeople, most likely you'll hire 3 that will not be efficient, will not be good, and you'll have to let them go, and then maybe 1 in 4 persons would be the right hire. It's sometimes, and it's really, as you said, as a founder, as like the founding team usually knows what the product's all about, and it's very passionate about it, and they know all the things it can do, and all the ways it can be tweaked and all that. But communicating that to your salespeople is not easy sometimes, so it's like this internal communication, the way you build your sales team. That's it takes a special set of skills, I would say, also to be like these leadership skills that are sort of enabling you to sort of transfer this passion of yours to other people, or like communicate it. So and it is then again, sometimes when founders are not all that experienced in that area, then you're starting to build your sales team, and then you're in dilemma, like whether I take somebody who's really experienced and has done it before and is probably now a bit removed from that, so that people, when they go to a certain level, they are sort of less likely to, do the cold calling and stuff. And so is somebody too early to hire, too late to hire? So it's an art.
Right. I love the metaphor about art. There's no right answer and no wrong.
Yeah, I think it's there's no recipe. You cannot say you put this and this and that, and then this is what you get in the end. It's not like that.
The current macroeconomic landscape has affected the valuation of soon-to-be unicorns in Southeast Europe. What can startups and companies do to increase their chance of fundraising in such downturns?
Yeah, I think especially in these later stages, the valuations were really, in a way, in my opinion, difficult to justify in some cases. But that was less like that in earlier stages. But in any case, so the valuations are one question. But in general, I think there's still capital on the market. It's still possible to get the funding. The thing there is like probably people who are giving the capital or investing are more, let's say, prudent when making an investment. So good companies usually can raise money. Even you actually, I read an article on Recursive actually today just about the Ukrainian startup raising while one of the co-founders was, in the army. So it proves that it can be done, right? So despite all the adverse situations, but I think like probably now it's more like if you have a better idea on how to get to profitability, how the company can grow, efficiently deploy the capital, that's probably one of the best things you can actually rely on right now to convince the investors. And of course, I mean, definitely you still need to have a very strong, let's say, selling proposition and value proposition that you're giving. So if you show that you are, there is a potential that you really are addressing something that's, let's say, an opportunity or a problem that is worth solving, then I think also the investment is something that can be raised.
You're also one of the founding members of the European Women in VC initiative.
Yeah.
What were your reasons to join, and what is the impact that you're already observing on the European scale? We mentioned Macedonia a bit earlier.
Pardon?
We mentioned Macedonia a bit earlier.
Yeah. So the idea of women in VC was there are very few female
founders.
Few female founders, but also few female investors. And all the statistics about how few there are on the partner level, but it's also true that there aren't too many even on more junior levels. So the idea of this was to sort of try to at least sort of connect or join somehow those that were or active. So we sort of kind of wanted to build like a network. The Kinga Stanislavska, who actually started with this initiative from Poland, she was saying like, guys have this boys club, so we need, like girls club. So the idea of that was just like to exchange more knowledge, and it was difficult, for example, like for all female funds also still is more difficult to raise funding. But on the other hand, I also think, it's like that for all first time or emerging, let's say, fund managers. It's always difficult to raise capital, regardless of where you're from, or who you are. I think there were a few initiatives started actually, also encouraging EIF as the biggest, let's say, LP in funds to sort of maybe support this female-led funds more, or be sort of introduce a certain bias towards that, which is for me, like I always support, and I think that we function best when there are mixed teams. So I don't believe in fully male or fully female teams. Like in principle, I think it's good to have a mixture. But I think the important thing is to just for women not to be sort of in a more unfavorable position when doing that. Just not to sort of be privileged or something, but just to have the equal chance to raise.
That's great. And seeing other ladies that started or invested, you're like, okay, why can't I? It is possible, isn't it?
Sure. And it's also like, I mean, there is a lot of discussions about that. Female founders are more likely to get investments from female investors, which probably is true. But I think it's also for, especially when you go down the path of, some products that are maybe more targeted towards women and all that. I guess it's easier to understand, right, if you're a woman. But I wouldn't say that this is like sort of this is the only area where this is,
How do you think we can support more female-founded startups or co-founded startups? Like you said, you prefer to have the diversity and...
Yeah, I think it's role models again, like with everything else. When you see, when you see inspiring founders, you're more likely to do it. And primarily just like not underestimating women that actually start businesses, because you typically... It was less likely, I think, for girls to have sort of, even initially, like support. Yeah, you would be entrepreneur. It's more likely that a boy would get this kind of, let's say, guidance or something like. Even it was. I think generally, like girls were not raised as you'll be an entrepreneur. And this is, again, it's very generalizing things, right? And I think that's this, when you see successful female entrepreneurs, then, they become your role model. Like, it's easier for a girl to have, like, there's this lady that started this great business, and, I can do it too, right? So it's like Me Too effect, which I think this is, and then what we really need is like just give equal opportunity, right? So that there's like that there are no additional obstacles for women that want to start that actually. And I think that's having like a lot of active women. So there, like I think in this region, as I said, I mean there aren't too many stay-at-home moms, I guess. So if you have like a larger pool of active people, then it's more likely that you'll also have more female founders.
For me, having this personal example is very important, and of course Sarah Blakely comes to mind because I watched her masterclass on entrepreneurship, and she was saying that her father sent her to school every day with one thing, as to do one thing to do. It's like to fail at something. So this, do you think this failure mentality, like failure is not like something at the end of the road, it's just like mistakes are normal. Learning opportunities. So it's something that we are lacking here, both male and females.
There was a lot of talk about that. I think even a few years ago we had even the, what was it called? Like fail conference or something. There was a lot of discussion about if failing is good, fail fast, and all that. I mean, nobody starts doing things with an idea, I'll fail in that, right? But what you need to sort of install in everybody is just like, okay, you failed, now what? You learned from it, okay, you won't fail because of the same thing again, hopefully. Take it as, I mean, it's not the end of the road, as you said. So you have to take it as a learning opportunity, let's say. And it's something that makes you stronger or wiser. And probably, it's, there was, I mean, and it's also always also depends on your environment. So if environment is such that actually once you fail, it's easy to, sort of you're not stigmatized, and then it's easy to start something new, then that's okay. But if like everybody's like, oh, he or she failed, then it's sort of, it's not very encouraging, right, for you to start and do other things. So I think maybe it used to be like, that people were more kind of ashamed of failing at something. I hope that's changing, and that this is seen just as a part of life and business. You fail at some things, and then the important thing is that you understand why you failed, and then try to learn from it and do it differently the next time, right?
Absolutely. As one of the first female investors in the region, what advice would you like to pass on to the next generation of female entrepreneurs and leaders?
Just to believe in themselves and then just be persistent. I recently shared a post about Melanie Perkins, who's the founder of Canva. She actually started Canva when she was at the university. She was 19. She didn't have any experience really in marketing or sales or business in general. She just knew that, designing can be done differently, like with all these terribly expensive tools and all that. And she knew that she can change that. And she was very persistent, and I read that, I'm not sure if that's true, but that she was turned down by about 100 investors she talked to initially. But even if there was just 50, it's still a large number. And it's pretty depressing when you get a lot of no's, especially if it's just one after another. But if you really feel like if you're passionate about something, then just, expect you'll have problems and challenges, but it's worth sort of persisting and keep going if you really believe in it.
Yeah, these are great words of encouragement towards everyone that has a dream, not only females but in general. So thank you very much for sharing it. Reminds me of our Endurosat that has this wonderful story about the founder thinking, how am I going to say that I've already captured enough capital from the people that I'm asking money from, like the angel investors. And at some point he got so many no's that at some point even the people started asking security to kick him out of the building because they thought he's crazy. But he never gave up, and now he's operating like a space tech in Bulgaria.
Which is, I can imagine that it's really, really tough sometimes after you get all this negative feedback. But if you're convinced and you're determined and you actually go for it and work for it, then I guess success is sort of a must, or not a must, but it happens.
So having this stubbornness that you mentioned right in the beginning of our conversation.
That is, you should not be like crazy stubborn, but you definitely need a bit of that, because if you don't, you give up too soon.
Some people say use the word vision for it, because it sounds a bit better than stubbornness, but actually it's more or less
persistence. It's all like you can find different, but it's like maybe just determined or whatever you want to say, but it has different expressions, I guess.
That's great. It's been an absolute pleasure, Tatjana, having you here on the podcast, and thank you very much for the entire region and supporting it in this way, finding funds and giving opportunities to companies to grow on the worldwide level. And can't wait to see for the next companies in the portfolio and the next successes of your VC initiative. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Georgi, and thank you, Recursive, for inviting me to this. And we're just announced another investment today, so we'll definitely here to stay a few more years and support the great tech entrepreneurs in this region.
Spectacular. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us this week too, and can't wait to have you back. See you.
Next on the Recursive podcast, Nikola Krstić, the CEO of the software company Anoris Technology.
20%. So I'm not blind, of course. I see perfectly on my right eye. The fun fact is that my brain actually used to see the world only on right eye. I don't use left eye for anything in the regular vision, only for peripheral. So that's when I look at you, I see everything. So I don't ever. That's why we discovered it when I was 10 years old, and I go to some eye inspection. To the doctor, and that's when they realized that I actually don't see well. And that's something that motivated me. I've been through many eye clinics and so on, and that motivated me to think about the problem. To just think about the problem, and the solution comes very natively, because in my place. Everyone who knows me as a problem solver. So when I see a problem, I'll always think, how can I solve it?
And if you're just as passionate about innovation as we are, hit subscribe for the Recursive podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. We're everywhere.